We all know that images are very important to a website. It gives our website a lot more meaning. Viewers like to see images, and they'll scan images much quicker than they'll scan text. It gives us much more richness. But I want to talk about image in a different way, and that is image sizes and how it impacts our browser and our download time for our viewers. So I have an image, I have a photo of an ocean that I found on the internet. If I look at the image properties, I'm going to go to image size, and this is being opened up in Photoshop. Image size is giving me some information about how large this image actually is. So right off the bat, it's 37 megabytes, which is a very large file. It's 3,800 pixels wide. It's 3,400 pixels high. So your experience already flags you to say that, wow, that's going to be way too wide for my web page, so I'm going to have to shrink that down. It is also showing us that we have a 300 pixel resolution, which is saying that for every inch of that image, there's 300 dots that are being used to represent the color, to give us color information. And the higher that number, the more sharp and crisp and color information that our eye is being provided. So 300 is very high. Incidentally, most of these photo editing software would give you the ability to change the measurement. Right now I'm in pixels, which is what we deal with when we're talking about graphics for the web page. Also for printing, if you were going to go to print. For the meantime, I'm just going to leave these settings the same. And let's go into our notepad and put in that image in our very bland web page. As you know, we're going to use the image tag. We're going to use the source equals, name of that file is an ocean JPEG. Always do an alt, because that way will be accessible to screen readers. Or if our image doesn't show for some reason, and we'll talk about that in another video, this would show up, the alt tag would show up instead, informational, ocean image. And here's where I'm going to alter my width. So instead of 3,800 pixels, I'm just going to make this one 300 pixels. I could put the height down, but if I don't know the exact ratio of that image, if I put a height down here, it's very possible that I will distort the image, and I don't want to distort the dimensions. So if I just leave a width or a height measurement, one or the other, the browser will automatically make that calculation and display the image so it doesn't get distorted. So I'm just going to give it a width. I could alternately just give it a height, but it's up to you. Okay, so I've got width, alt, source, so I should be good here. So let's just take a peek at our image and see that it's showing up. Sure enough, it shrunk my image down, and that looks much better on my screen than 3,800 pixels wide. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, because I want to bring a point home, is I'm going to validate this code. Now I see a lot of you making mistakes on your validation, or you're not checking your validation, or maybe you're getting to your validation and you don't know how to fix it. I would suggest that every step you make a change, that's when you go in and validate to make sure that your change worked. If you fill up this entire page with text, and then you go into your validator and it gives you 20 different error messages, well, that's a little intimidating. So take each step at a time and throw that into the validator to see if it's working. So I'm going to copy this text, and I'm going to come into the validator. I chose validate by direct input. And I'm actually expecting an error here because I want to show something to you. First of all, that I've got a very slow internet connection at the moment. And it's giving me an error message. And that's not comfortable. I did this intentionally because I want to show you something that can be frustrating. For example, wow, I thought I put something in very simple. Well, first of all, since I didn't put a lot of text in, it's going to be easy to try and determine where the error is. And it's giving me this error about the width. And I want to show you a little secret here that's not otherwise obvious. In my width, I intentionally put 300 pixels because that's what most beginner programmers or beginner web designers do, because it's 300 pixels wide. Well, if you actually leave out this pixel and just leave 300, that's the default for the browser. So if you leave out 300, if you leave out the pixels on the 300, then it should validate. So there's a little tidbit for you. So leave out the pixels. All right, so now my code is validating and all is happy skippy. Well, it's not really happy skippy, and I'll tell you why. Even though let me go back to our image here in our, oh, I lost it. Okay. Even though our image is, it appears to be small in our browser, and I have a very slow internet connection out here in the sticks where I live, if you're asking a user to view my image, and you're asking, even though I put the width to be 300 pixels, the browser still has to download that entire 37 megabyte image into this browser window before it shrinks it down. So if you've got somebody with a if you have a lot of images or someone with a very slow bandwidth, asking the browser to download a 37 megabyte file is really unfair to your users, and it doesn't provide a good user experience. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop and share some information with you. Back in image, the very first thing you need to be aware of is when we're dealing with web pictures, with web photos, the highest that our displays can generate images is 72. So the very first thing you should do is change your resolution no higher than 72 pixels per inch. The eye is not going to detect the difference between 300 and 72 through our computer screens. But look what it did to my file. It automatically brought my file down in file size. And Photoshop also adjusted my width and my height for me to shrink it down to the new resolution. But 900 pixels is still too wide. I only wanted it to be 300. So what you should do is, if you know that you're not going to need a 900 pixel width image, shrink it down. Get into a photo editing software and shrink it down before you upload it to your server and before you ask it to be downloaded onto your page. Look at the difference in file size. I've now gone from a 37 megabyte file to a 230 kilobyte file. Well, that's a huge difference. This file is going to load much faster into my browser than the 37 megabyte file, and it's going to look the same on the screen. So if I save this image now, so I still have the ocean JPEG, well, make it look the normal size, there we go. And I come back and I reload this image, it should look the same, but it's going to load a lot quicker into my browser. So we've seen how it's important to shrink down the size of that file, both in resolution and in pixel width, before that's ever loaded into the browser, so that way it provides a better user experience.